as I say, I'm going to be conducting this interview not so much in intellectual arguments, because I'm just not on your level, Richard. That's hopefully for the future when we do that with others that will come, if you would so agree to that. But I'm going to read some of the emails and questions that came in from viewers.
Oh, right.
And they'll be along the lines that you'll be very good at answering, I know that, but it will be good for our viewers. And also, in this, what I'm hoping to try and achieve like this is for our viewers to get to know the man, you know, Richard Dawkins, rather than what they perceive or what they hear about you, because the Internet's a powerful tool
right.
for mistruths. You know, maybe I'll start there. I mean, talk to us about being an atheist, and does that stop you from doing good works? No, of course it doesn't. You know, and all of that sort of thing, because you're as much maligned as an atheist as I am a Christian.
Yes, yes. There's absolutely no reason to think that you need to be a Christian, or indeed a Muslim or anything else, in order to be good. There's no correlation there at all, and it would be not terribly praiseworthy, I think, if that were the case, because if the only reason you were good is that, say, you were afraid of God or something, then I think you would agree with me that that wouldn't be a very noble reason for being good. And so being an atheist shouldn't really have any effect on whether you're good. The other reason you might think people would be good is if they're trying to follow the example of their holy book, the Quran or the Bible, whatever it is. And you get a pretty mixed sort of morals if you follow the Bible. I mean, bits of it are okay, but I don't suppose you would wish to follow everything in the book of Leviticus, for example, or the book of Numbers, or the book of Deuteronomy.
Well, there are some things in there which perhaps could be misconstrued. Yes,
that's one way to put it.
But there are some things in there that are definitely an advantage to us today, and particularly since, well, the last 200 years, we find that the laws on cleanliness are very important, and perhaps came before man realized, and particularly talking on medical science, that they didn't realize, you know, a simple thing like washing your hands before you went from the Godiva to deliver a baby. I mean, that was only something that happened 200 or 300 years ago.
By all means, let's listen to our doctors and read what their medical books say. You don't need to go to the Bible for that now. You can get it from your doctor.
Right, but I mean, the Bible was written according to, yes, even if you disagreed with the timing of it, it certainly was written pre-Christ. So for the laws in Leviticus, on the
but we
laws
don't
of
have to
cleanliness.
go on getting it from Leviticus. We can get it from our doctor now. Yeah.
Right. Okay. This comes in here. Darwin seemed to express that the evolution of the eye was a hard case to explain, says the person who emailed this in to me, Steve, I think it was. Do you have any cases yourself where there is uneasiness with this?
Well, that's a famous quote from Darwin. Darwin said something like, to suppose that the eye, with all its intricate contrivances, he goes on in great detail about how complicated and beautiful the eye is, could come about as a result of evolution by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree, words to that effect. That quotation is very often given, but it isn't followed by what Darwin next said, which was to spend a good part of a chapter explaining exactly why actually it is explicable. And it's a very, in a way, it's a good rhetorical technique to, as it were, offer something to your opponents before you then disillusion them. Where it fails is if your opponents then take the offer and then don't quote what follows. So, the eye is actually very well explicable by evolution, and I've explained it in especially two of my books, The Blind Watchmaker and Climbing the Mount Improbable. But that wasn't the question you asked me. You asked me the question, is there anything that I find particularly difficult? No, because that's not the way science works. We don't say, this is a very difficult case, therefore God must have done it. Therefore, science can't explain it. Therefore, the supernatural must be wheeled in to explain it. That isn't the way we work. If science can't explain it, then we say, all right then, let's go to work. Let's see what we need to do, what new theories we need to bring into our science, how we need to change our science. That technique has always worked so far. If there was something that I was genuinely puzzled about, then my response would not be, oh, it must be supernatural. My response would be, then in that case we must roll our sleeves up and go to work to try to understand it.
Right. Well, because to me, this is, apart from the person who emailed us in, this is really, and I put it at the top of my list because it's something that bothered me when I was growing up, that I thought, how could we have evolved? Because the eye is so complex. For example, we've got cameras in the studio here, and they need camera operators to pull focus and to be able to change shots and everything. And the more distance or close-up you get, you have to change the actual iris of the camera, perhaps even open it or close it a little bit. So that's all done instantaneously within the brain, the human brain. And it's so complex that I thought, how could we have been bumping around without sight for thousands or millions of years if we've evolved, when really it needed to be functioning from the word go?
Well, yes, all right, I will answer that question. Certainly, you're absolutely right. The eye is a most remarkable organ, and it does the same sorts of things that these television cameras do. It does instant focusing. It does instant stopping down with the iris diaphragm. It's got full color, three color vision, just like modern televisions have, and it is a remarkably beautiful. It's not totally flawless. There are interesting flaws, interesting imperfections, which actually are revealing. Nevertheless, it does work very well, and an engineer would give it somewhat high marks for being well, quote, designed. Now, you raise the question, doesn't it all have to be working before it'll work, it's any good? How could we bump along for millions of years with only half an eye? That's a bit of a fallacy, because actually only a quarter of an eye, only a hundredth of an eye is better than nothing. You can make a slowly climbing ramp of improvement from just the very rudiments of vision, just say being able to tell the difference between light and shade, nothing more than that, right up to the perfection of a human eye or the eye of a hawk, say. And in order for evolution to explain that, all we need is that there should be a ramp of improvement where every step, a hundredth of an eye, 200ths of an eye, 300ths of an eye, etc., 50% of an eye, 51% of an eye, each step has got to be an improvement on the one that went before. And it's easy to see why that would be. You start by being able to tell whether there's a shadow, whether it's night or day. Shadow's useful. That could be a predator moving overhead in the sea. Night or day is obviously useful for all sorts of purposes. Then you could imagine a cup. Instead of just having a flat sheet of light-sensitive cells, the edges turn up into a cup. Now, the cup means that if there's light coming from that direction, it hits that part of the eye. If there's light coming from that direction, it hits that part of the eye. So already the animal can tell the direction from which light is coming and the direction from which a shadow is coming. So we haven't got an image yet. All we've got is the direction of light. Now the cup can steadily and slowly over evolutionary time close over until you end up with a little hole at the top. And the little hole at the top, the same principles working all the way, that light coming from that direction hits that part of the retina, and from that direction hits this part of the retina, but because there's a hole, it's rather more precisely, not exactly focused, but light from there hits there, light from there hits there, light from there hits there, because it's got to get through the hole. We're moving towards a pinhole camera. Now, a pinhole camera, if you make the hole small enough, and remember we're having a smooth gradient of closing up the hole, if you make the hole small enough, then it makes a sharp, focused image. The trouble with a pinhole camera is that the image is very dim because very little light can get through the pinhole. What you need is a lens, because what a lens does is gather light from different directions and focus it on a point. Instead of it having to go right through the middle of the hole, it can be gathered from a wider range of sources. Now, a lens is not difficult to arrange. Any old chunk of transparent gubbins will do the job better than a pinhole. So once again, we've got a slow, gradual improvement. Any old lump of gubbins, transparent, is better than nothing, and then the lens simply improves its shape gradually, gradually. It's got to be gradually. Every step has got to be a slight improvement over the previous one. You get a lens.
Can I just ask you though, Richard?
Yes.
How long did this process take?
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, we've got hundreds of millions of years to play with, because that's what geological time gives us. I mean, we've got maybe 1 billion years since the first eye, since the first focusing eye appeared.
What about the trilobite?
Trilobites have very beautiful eyes.
Very, very clever. I mean, it's amazing.
They have compound eyes, which is what modern insects and crustaceans have.
But the trilobite has, in the fossil record, is exactly the same today as it was, or in that sense. It didn't evolve, it had those lenses.
Trilobites today.
No, I mean, but it had the lens mechanism, which is quite powerful.
Well, trilobites have compound eyes, which is a very different principle and very interesting principle. It doesn't focus quite as sharp an image as our eyes do, but it is a very beautiful thing. And trilobites do go back hundreds of millions of years, 500 million years, 500 million years. It must have taken some time before trilobites came on the scene, but even trilobites are relatively recent compared to the age of the Earth, which is 4.5 billion years old.
Obviously, of course, as a creationist or believer in creation, the Book of Genesis, you know, I would disagree with that. But
what would you disagree with?
With the time. The timing.
How old do you think the world is then?
I would say that because I'm a Bible-believing Christian, that I believe that the Book of Genesis is in actual fact the record, because Christ as well referred often to the Book of Genesis, that in the beginning, Adam and Eve, and I know that. But before we get onto that, because we can come back to that, is that there is an email that came in with regards to the eye, which I'd like to read, because it's quite intelligently written.